All right, so this is another episode of the McDermott Library Coffee Talk quasi-official podcasts, whatever we're calling these events. I'm Chris Edwards, and I'm here with instruction librarian Katie Robinson. And hopefully, at some point, we will have an audience that will watch these and appreciate our brilliance, even in retrospect. But we've chosen a cool topic for this week's or this month's coffee talk. We are going to talk about infrequently asked questions, or the weird, unusual, or just strange things that people get ask us for. So Katie has compiled a list of some of the more unusual questions we've come up with by trolling our stats and also polling our staff. And all of us are convinced that there are even more unusual questions that we have somehow forgotten or blocked because we get so many questions. But we've got a few that are really interesting. So, Katie, why don't you get started with what do you think um, we should be talking about here?
Yeah. So like Chris said, these are infrequently asked questions. They're weird, they're wacky, they're unique and very specific. Most of them are legitimate research questions. We do get the occasional weird question where you're like, why are you asking that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I
Mhm.
buy that this is legitimate. But
Yes, I've definitely had a conspiracy theorist
oh
years ago. It came up and was trying to get me to help them find information about the government interfering in something, but I can't remember what his actual theory was because it was so A, laughable, but B, trivial
out
that I was
there.
like, not only is it unlikely that they did that, I wouldn't really care if they did.
Yeah, yeah. There's no yeah. Um Yeah, so these are I tried to pick things that seemed legitimate, just like really interesting or kind of weird. Um, so yeah, these are from students, faculty, staff, from our stats, and then also, like Chris said, I polled our staff to see if they could remember any really funky questions that they got asked. And so some people pulled stuff from prior jobs or prior organizations they worked with. So we've got some really interesting ones. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about the question, and we're gonna talk about where we would go to answer this question, kind of the process of, okay, I've been asked this question. What does the person really want to know? Where can I direct them to find resources on this? And if you remember, if it was your question and you kind of remember, if it turned out well or not, because I definitely know I have the questions where I'm like, you can check here, but I'm not sure you're gonna find anything. Like I just
Yeah.
don't think that exists. Um, so let's get started. Our first one on the list is researching current and trending forecasts for the global bone marrow research industry.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one first. I was trying to scramble to see what I would come up with. Um, I think what I would do for that one is I would look into PubMed, like which is the related to the National Library of Medicine. So it's the biggest collection of United States medical. My back of my chair just broke. Um, medical research articles. Um, oh no, it just leans now. That's weird. I can rock. Um, so I would probably go to PubMed and just look for the most recent articles and see if I could identify trends that way. There isn't
Mhm.
really like a metric that, you go to a website and type in your industry and it tells you what the research trends are. You have to sort of find them by digging through the research. The
Mhm.
other thing that I might do is see if there are any reports on medical research as an industry. 'Cause I don't know if there is reports down to the specific like bone marrow research, but I'm sure that there's information about medical research. And I'm actually kind of digging right now through Global Market Information Database or Euromonitor, which is great for kind of international market survey data and
Okay.
just see if there's statistics or an analysis. I'm seeing well, medical tourism is discussed a lot.
Yeah.
And then I see some reports on drug and medical appliance industries. So I think if we continue drilling at that one, we would probably find something related to medical research.
Yeah, definitely. What
But
I've
that's what I
found Yeah, what I've found is a lot of these questions, is that people will ask them, and it's about half and half between undergraduate and graduate students. And the undergraduate students just think it's a really cool topic, but the graduate students are trying to do their thesis or dissertation on the topic. And a lot of the times for those students, you end up saying, look, you're just going to have to create your own data set for this. And this is so unique that you're going to have to figure it out on your on your own. And here's where you can find some stuff, but
yeah,
it's mostly
the
your luck.
expectation might be a little
Yeah,
different for a grad student.
definitely. Um, yeah, so our next question was actually one that I had, and I remember because I loved the topic. And it was someone who wanted historical newspaper articles about Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier. And he had given me the date, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I think it was like August something or July something. Anyways, during the summer, when he broke the sound barrier. And so he was looking in like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal to try to find stuff, and it was around this time period. Well, it turns out it was classified. The event was classified.
Mm,
Until later in the year, it was actually declassified and in December, and then was reported finally in the New York Times. Um, so for that one, what I did was I started, I started looking in New York Times and Wall Street Journal and the bigger, more influential newspapers that we have to be just because I knew that there would be a big spread, a good
hmm
spread with great pictures and stuff like that.
Right.
Couldn't find it for the date. Couldn't find it for the date. So finally, I was like, well, maybe they didn't tell anybody for a while. So I just sort of looked it up in a historical database. I think I used I think honestly, I think I might have used the Homeland Security or the security or government. I can't remember what it is, but I looked at that one and it was like, oh, well, there were papers saying declassified with a date. It's like, oh, okay, so it was classified up until that point. And then I started looking soon after it was declassified those dates, and sure enough, I mean, it was the first paper after that date for the New York Times. Big old front page above the fold, beautiful picture, cool article by who I'm sure was their top journalist at the time. But yeah, that was interesting because I was confused as to why nobody had reported on it until at the time, and then once I figured out oh, it was classified, then that made a lot more sense. But it turns out the guy was wanting to order a front page newspaper reprint for a family member as a Christmas present. That's why he was interested. Was he wanted to know what date so he could order it from the New York Times because you can order reprints of front pages and articles and stuff. So that's what he ended up wanting. But yeah, that was a fun um, sort of deep dive that I had to do there, and I loved it. It was fun. That was a good time. I also looked in our aviation archives here because I thought we might have something since we have the aviation collection. But yeah, it was just because they'd waited until they told the public. So yeah.
No, that makes sense. So expand your date range, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, and definitely when it comes to stuff that's new and exciting in science or stuff that's by the government and stuff like that, definitely I recommend to people to make sure that it wasn't classified at the time of the event because you know the government classifies random things for random reasons.
Yeah, I suppose you wouldn't automatically assume something would be classified if you've heard about it.
Yeah, exactly. You think, oh, Chuck Yeager breaks the sound barrier? That was definitely big news, and it was
I've heard about
later.
it, but
Yeah, yeah. I think it was in the 40s. I think maybe the 50s. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I don't know either.
Yeah. So that was fun. Another this next one is interesting and very appropriate for UT Dallas because we're a chess school. Um, so this person wanted an academic reference for the Manhattan Chess Club voting to admit women in 1938.
Mm,
So how would you go about that one?
I
I know.
um I suppose I would look into social issues
Mhm.
databases and
Yeah.
just see what I could find on Manhattan Chess Club. Um, I think the academic part is probably what would stymie me the most because I don't know with it. It's not my research area, but I would wonder about the academic impact of a specific
Mhm.
chess club making a vote.
I don't know.
Um,
It might be a big chess club. I don't.
I don't
It's not
know.
my area of research either.
I know we have a faculty member in interdisciplinary studies
I think so. Dr.
whose
Root.
research area is
Yeah.
game theory and specifically chess.
Mhm.
Yes, Dr. Root, and she does a this makes me think of her, so I would maybe ask her if she what she would recommend for academic sources. I would go outside the
Yeah.
library.
That's one of the things I think we've had to learn as academic librarians, or that you learn when you get into the library field, is sometimes, well, a lot of times, the answer to the question is, let me check with so and so. I know that they know a lot about this topic. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so you end up, and that's why we have library liaisons, is because you want to have someone who is really up to date, or at least mostly up to date, on the topic. Yeah,
That's
knows where to
probably a good
find the information.
reminder
Yeah.
for librarians and also faculty that the librarians don't have to work completely independently of the faculty. It's okay for
Mhm.
us to say, you know what, I don't know, but I know a faculty member who might,
Yes. Yeah.
and vice
Definitely.
versa. Like faculty members can also ask us for help and do
Hmm.
frequently.
Yeah. Yeah. I know Dr. Root specifically does come and talk to us, when she needs help finding specific
Mm.
sources and stuff. So, yeah. So, our next one is Supreme Court decisions that modified or otherwise interpreted the U.S. Constitution, Section 1, Article 4.
I'm gonna say I would bunt this one to you. Let's ask Katie. She loves these kinds of things. Um, no, but in all seriousness, I would probably start with the USA.gov and
Hmm.
look for something published by the government because
Yeah.
there was whole sections of library school about government publications and they're very confusing. But the U.S. code, any currently running U.S. law is going to be represented on an official government website.
Hmm.
So it would just be a matter of digging to that.
Yeah.
And USA.gov is a kind of a government Google. So I would look there, possibly Hide Online as well, because you can
Hmm.
do case law there.
Yeah. Definitely, since it's Supreme Court decisions, I would probably go to the Supreme Court website, which I think is SCOTUS.gov
Probably.
or SupremeCourt.gov. It's one of those. Um, and I would go there and look. They have a lot of the big decisions. The historical big decisions are pretty easy to find, and then the other stuff you kind of have to dig for. That's not such big decisions. And I can't remember off the top of my head
Right.
what this one's
So
about. But
I'm looking at
article.
right now the Constitution .congress.gov has an annotated constitution, and so Article 1, Section 4 pertains to the election for senators and representatives.
Hmm, interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so I don't know. This person may have been researching term limits, or something like that, or age, or because there are all sorts of rules that have to do with being in Congress, state and federal.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, definitely Hein would be a good resource, I think. But also, yeah, Supreme Court or Constitution website.
It's kind of like looking at the question and figuring out which part here is the clue to start with,
Yeah,
because I can definitely find the text of the Constitution, but it's the Supreme Court decisions that
yeah, it's the decisions you
actually
want, and
matter.
then you would also you'll have different justices who specialize in certain areas, that have opinions on areas. So anytime you had a gender discrimination lawsuit or case, uh, Ruth Bader Ginsburg always wrote an opinion on it, almost always. Whether she agreed with or disagreed with the ruling, always an opinion because she was an expert in that type of law. Um, and um, Scalia always had something to say about religious discrimination law. He was very big on that. So yeah, so you can usually find if you are researching this topic, chances are that you've got if you're researching it seriously, chances are you're going to kind of figure out, oh, well, so and so, Chief Justice so and so, or Justice so and so is going to be big on this topic. So you can sort of hone in on the justice that you think will most likely have opinions, most likely have rulings on the case. Justice Sotomayor, I just remembered, does a lot on immigration, always has an opinion on immigration decisions, stuff like that. So, and I think Roberts does a lot on healthcare, but
Hmm.
there, you'll have the ones who, when they were lawyers and they really specialized in this type of
Yeah,
law, and
but
so
those are,
they'll,
I mean, those are all sort of you happen to know those things because you've been paying attention more than the
yeah,
average.
yeah.
But for the schooled questioner, it would be where do I begin?
Yes, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and definitely where to begin would be Hine or Supreme Court. Um,
SupremeCourt.gov, by the
it
way.
is supremecOurt.gov. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm looking at it right now.
awesome.
I'm
Yeah,
always. So the
always
next
Googling.
question on your list, I'm actually going to jump in and talk about this one because this one is recent. Actually, it's a question from the current semester.
This one's
Um,
yours too. You answered this one.
I did, and this one actually, um, what we have written down is accounting review journals from 2018 to 2021 related to tax search skills, which on the surface is not a particularly challenging question if you
Hmm.
know how to get into a particular journal. What made this one challenging is the student had actually misinterpreted and conflated more than one question, and therefore added restrictions to the answer that didn't need to be there. This was
Hmm.
actually a much longer question. I spent an hour with this particular student, and
Yeah,
I want to be sensitive because obviously this student is still here and the professor is still here.
of
So
course.
in this case, what made the question weird was the way that it was relayed to me.
Hmm.
So I was relayed an inexact translation of the question,
Hmm.
and um, the student was very confused, and we had to go back to the actual assignment page and look at, okay, for example, the 2018 to 2021 was a screenshot from a different part of course that was not related to that question. So we could throw that year boundary away, and then we were actually looking for a particular article with particular keywords from one of a particular set of journals. And then
Yeah.
later on in the page, he actually gave us a hint and told us which journal. So once we got to that, I
Hmm.
was like, right, so it's in this journal. Put in the keywords and I found exactly one article.
Yeah.
So with the correct clues properly identified, there was only one possible answer and it came up really quickly, but it was kind of getting to that. So I think the takeaway from this one is sometimes what people ask,
Hmm.
um, especially if they've been working on it for a while, has migrated like in minuscule steps from where they started to what they're now asking you. So you have to sometimes strip it back and be like, let's look at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is if you're working on a question for a class and you are 6 hours into your investigation and getting nowhere, um, talk to a librarian. Actually, don't wait 6 hours. Like
Yeah.
talk to us. If you have not got a clue on how to do it within 30 minutes, if it's a research like journal related question, talk to a librarian
Absolutely.
earlier rather than later because I feel bad about the amount of time that was spent on that one. And there were other related questions to that.
Hmm.
Um, but it was significant just in the way that the question had changed between the professor asking it and the student asking me.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of in language that you sort of
Mhm.
develop as a librarian or as an academic. And so if I, am asking a question and I might use certain language that if I have a student, especially an undergraduate student
Mhm.
or a new grad student, they're gonna go, I don't know what you're asking. Um, so
Right.
it's definitely there's a lot of translating that we
There's
sometimes have to do.
jargon, and then there's also some like really specific, I can't think of an example, of repetitive phrasing. So if I hear a particular
Hmm.
way of saying something, I'm like, I think you're
Yeah,
having this problem. Whereas
yeah,
like, you know, denotatively, it means exactly the same thing, but connotatively, I mean, like people
right.
who use that word are usually in this field, and what they actually mean is this other word.
Exactly, exactly. And it's different. It's different from different fields, right? So if I talk about policy, um, it it means the same thing, right? It's got the same dictionary definition. But if I
Mhm.
talk about policy with my husband who does IT work, it's about, well, who can use certain programs, what times can they access these programs, what's the user policy. Whereas if I talk about policy with my classmates, right, we're talking about like, um, what kind of tax law is there
Right. You're
and
talking about
how
legal
does the
policy.
bureaucracy apply the law and stuff like that. And so, you've got the same word, but it means totally different things. And
And
that,
sometimes policy can mean procedure rather
yes,
than like
exactly,
literal
exactly.
law. So it's learning to take away apart these questions. Um, we're just having a good jaw fest here, Lorene. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, sorry, I'm a little late. I got an unexpected call from above.
Okay.
No worries. We have a joining office wall, so I could tell that you were on a call.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, thank
And it's just the bunch of us kind of going through our questions and recording this for posterity,
Mhm.
and hopefully we'll get it up
Okay.
on YouTube, and somebody will enjoy listening to a couple of librarians nattering on.
True, true.
Why don't we
Yeah.
pitch one to Lorene?
Sure,
Oh no,
sure.
yes, go ahead. I'm ready.
Let me sort of scan and see if there's a really good one that we can ask.
Oh, I know one on here that actually Lorene originated.
Ooh, go for it.
Oh
So
no,
she can tell us what she did as the person who actually got the question.
I'm afraid.
Lorene,
Okay.
how would you handle someone who is looking for audio recordings of the original Gettysburg Address?
Oh my goodness, I remember this question.
I knew you would.
I was truthfully taken aback a little because one, there was no audio recording invented as yet in what was that, 1863
Hmm.
Yeah.
when it was delivered. And two, there just wasn't any technology to support that as yet. But I found it an interesting question.
hmm
And
I mean,
so,
it would
uh-huh,
be, it certainly, we could find a recording of somebody reading the Gettysburg Address. But I
yes,
think what made this one stick in my memory is you told me immediately afterwards that the questioner got almost belligerent about like there's got to be a recording of Lincoln delivering this speech.
yes, yes, he was very, very persistent. And so I did recommend lots of recordings of all kinds of actors and celebrities and historians having recorded that, but we could never get the original just because of technology and invention. So
Hmm.
it's like, I loved that question though, because it was such a great teaching moment.
Yeah. We
Absolutely.
were just talking about how, sometimes there's jargon and sometimes there's like in language and ways that people phrase things and you kind of have to understand, okay, you're coming from this perspective, so you mean this.
Right,
Uh,
exactly.
and
Yes.
also, we do have a lot of students whose English is not their first language.
Hmm.
And so they'll ask for something and you'll get sort of used to the way certain language speakers adapt to English and the way they
Right.
ask certain things. You're like, oh, okay, well, what you really mean is this. and so
Mm-hmm.
you just kind of take it and go. But
So,
that's definitely learned behavior. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I have been in my other screen sort of keeping up with these questions as we go and trying to see what I can find. And I did find, just to plug the library a little bit, we have in NACSA Spoken Word Library, we actually have it's called Heritage USA Documents and Speeches, but we have recorded readings of U.S. documents, and one of them is Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not read by Lincoln.
Of
But we
course.
do have a recording of it if they wanted to hear it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something we could have found, just it would not have been Lincoln's voice.
Right. Oh yes, most definitely. So, having an idea of what the library has in our online sources, for one, is
Mhm.
always so useful because it helps us to interpret what the library user might need and what would be most useful.
I
So
do
that
think
is
it
a
would
good
be
thing.
fun to hear some more historical like figures in their actual voices, because it would amuse me to no end to like go back in time and find out that Caesar had a really high like falsetto voice or
They
that
say that
something nasal.
Lincoln, his voice was very reedy and very high pitched. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
I
and
think that without changing the words, that would might change my take on the speech. I
yeah,
hadn't heard that about Lincoln, but
yeah. I was listening to a philologist, and he was talking about how based on like they looked at like Lincoln's throat and
oh,
like the way his vocal cords, like you can kind of tell how stuff worked. Anyway, that he probably had a very kind of high pitched nasally voice,
huh.
which is interesting to me. Yeah,
that is
Yeah.
but
interesting.
I agree,
Sorry,
Chris.
tangent.
Yeah, I love to hear like when presidents write their autobiographies. I love it when they read them themselves on like
Mm,
Audible.
mm-hmm.
That I love that. That's very because then you're getting it in its actual. You're getting the emotion behind it that no one else can give it.
See, like books of humorous essayists,
Hmm.
and some of them are really good, not just writers but also performers, and then some of them are not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, this would be a great time to hire an actor.
Yes.
Yes. Oh,
One of
most
the
definitely.
ones that I've enjoyed, President Obama's autobiography. He's got such a distinctive pattern of speech
Hmm.
that he's just the best person to read his own autobiography because
Mm,
even when you read it, you kind of hear it in his voice, but then to hear him actually read it is it's meaningful, right? And so
mm-hmm.
I've I enjoyed listening to that, especially because his pattern of speech is so distinctive. Um,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
And you can tell so much from the person also, whether it's the president or an actor or
Mhm.
some famous person, you can tell so much by just listening to how they speak and how they deliver messages.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
very enjoyable. I still, though, I think I may get his name wrong. Billy Bob Thornton
Hmm.
did Lincoln.
Hmm.
And to me, that was kind of what I imagined Lincoln looking like and sounding like. And they were both
Funny.
such tall guys.
Hmm.
So he was kind of like the ideal Lincoln.
Well, it's kind of like Hal Holbrook, who played Mark Twain so much that
Yes.
Hmm.
Oh my
people now
goodness.
cannot distinguish pictures of Twain from Holbrook.
Exactly, which is an interesting sociological question
Hmm.
that somebody should look into.
Oh yeah. That would make great research.
Oh yeah, definitely. So here's a fun one that
Okay.
is very specific to UTD. This was someone who wanted help finding historical photos of the UTD campus, particularly aerial photos.
Well, I know exactly where to send that question to now, but it might predate. Um, I can't remember how old that question is because
It
it
definitely
seems
predated
familiar.
me.
Yeah. But we have the university archives, and so all those types of
Right, we
photos
do.
would be in the hands of our archivist, Dr. Thomas Allen. But
Hmm.
I'm fairly certain that I was around for this question. I don't know if I received it directly, but it was before we had an official university archive. So
Okay.
it would have been more difficult at that time than it would be now.
It was, and I sort of remember it because we had to kind of hunt down, like, would it be in arts and humanities or would it be in the president's office? And I think we didn't have such a very firm and controlled communications department on campuses yet. And so it was a hunt.
Yeah, I think we all kind of got in on it. We
Hmm.
started looking at like the Dallas land office and
Right. All
Yeah.
kinds of things. Of course, there weren't any drones as yet.
no.
Oh,
But there are
so
some aerial photos of like, 70 when 75 was put in and
Mhm.
mhm.
kind of the area, but I don't know how specific we ever got with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
there are aerial photographs do exist. I've seen a couple of them of the
Mhm.
area of the UT Dallas area, but I don't know if they were taken by Texas Instruments or the government or who
Well,
knows.
and also there once was a kind of library, campus, everything photographer, Rick
Hmm,
Bidenstadt, and he just took photos of anything and everything all around campus. One of the photographs I love the best is when there's nothing here but one building and everything was in that building, classrooms and the cafeteria and the library was in the basement. And so, but outside of that, it was all prairie, not even trees, prairies. So
just
now when I drive around campus or I go for walks, I love the trees. It just makes the landscape so gorgeous. But
mhm.
yeah, there was nothing but prairie and this one little building.
I love that.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
gonna drop out of the call for just a minute so I
Okay.
can respond to Ellen. But I will.
Okay.
Y'all continue talking amongst yourselves. I'll be right back.
Sounds
All right.
good.
Will do.
Um,
What
one
else
of
do
the
you have, Katie?
one of the questions that we got from Ellen, from our dean, um, that she had gotten, I think when she was at Dallas Public,
Ah,
um, was the chemical composition of a human,
mm-hmm.
which half of is a little bit spooky, right? It's a little bit
Uh-huh.
appropriate for Halloween month.
Right. Perfect for Halloween. What
Yeah,
is this person researching?
I don't
Highly
know,
suspicious now. Oh
but
gosh, but that's
yeah,
answerable. That is actually answerable.
yes, yeah. Some of these questions are not answerable, and some of them are. You just need to know what database to go to.
Hmm.
I might send them
Right.
to SciFinder. That has
Right.
a lot of chemical literature, and
Hmm.
you can even on SciFinder you can look up like chemical structures and stuff, and it'll show you the molecular structure, a picture of it.
Right.
Um,
Uh-huh.
so that's where I might send them to
Oh
find.
yeah. That would definitely be the starting place because we used to have, I think Matt McCauco used to have all the chemistry students come in for their lab, their library lab segment. And he used, I think it was peanut oil
Hmm.
as the chemical he taught them with and showed how peanut oil is in everything and
Hmm.
it's highly used in lots of I don't know if it still is in lots of fast food.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Um,
So it's all fried.
yeah. I like to use caffeine molecule when I
Oh,
teach SciFinder. That's my
hmm,
favorite one to use because we all rely on it so heavily.
that's true. Of
Yeah.
course, you could do a comparison: tea caffeine versus coffee caffeine.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, what's the chemical composition of,
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of my early days. I had just moved here and I got a job at Dallas Public Library. And it's a general librarian, which included like children's librarian, reference librarian,
Mhm.
ordering librarian, cataloging librarian. It
Wherever
was
they needed you.
everything. Yes, a
Yeah.
very small local branch. I don't think it exists anymore. Walnut Hill.
Okay.
It was phased out or merged with another. But the question I got was, how much does a gallon of water weigh? And I always remember that question because I'm a new librarian, fresh out of library school. And I'm like, where am I going to find this? And it turned out we got that question something like 15 times in the one day, and it was a homework question for one of the local middle schools. So we were like, should we fill something with a gallon of water and weigh it? But it's in a book. It has to be in a book.
Yeah. That's hilarious. I love
Yeah.
it when that happens. We have
Oh,
those questions here where at a
Google
certain
says
time,
8.34 pounds.
there you go.
there you go. There was no Google back in 1988
I
when I
love that.
started.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I know.
At the beginning of the semester we get because we'll have certain classes who teach certain things, and they'll have um traditional assignments where they have to come and find
Mhm.
stuff, and we always get the where are the psychology books, because they
Right.
have to go up and take a selfie for extra credit or something. um
Mm-hmm.
so we have to show them, this is how you find books, this is how you read a um call number and all that
Right.
stuff. So
We used to have a student when I first started. She was, I guess, fangirl would be a strong way to say it, but she was a library enthusiast. She quite enjoyed the librarians and talking with us, and so she would come up with
Ah.
questions just as kind of an excuse to like, let's see if I can come up with a weird question for you today. And I remember she asked me how much food a giraffe ate in a day.
oh,
Oh.
excellent.
Mm.
And we
That's
happen to
great.
have a zoological encyclopedia in our reference section, and I pulled that and found the answer much faster than she expected me to. And I think but she enjoyed that I treated it like a real question because it was.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, of course, of course. Do you remember how much
I
food?
want to say it was something like 300 pounds a day,
Oh, that makes
but
Oh
sense.
my
I
goodness.
may be exaggerating that. In my memory may have made it a bigger number than it actually was.
Well, you know what? Every question is a great question. And see, we learned something about giraffes.
Hmm.
Of course, now I'm
Definitely.
going to Google it and see.
Of course. Yeah.
Oh
Google
yeah,
is definitely.
I definitely made that a lot bigger than it was. Um,
It's more like 30 pounds,
it's more like 75 pounds.
There you
75.
go.
There you
But
go.
Still a lot. A lot.
That is still a lot. Almost eaten what, maybe a fifth of her weight
Hmm.
as a giraffe.
Yeah. Giraffes are big. Yeah.
They're very big and
yeah,
tall.
apparently they have 3 hearts
Wow.
or three
Hmm.
heartbeats.
Oh, three heartbeats. They have a
Like
different.
their heartbeats in 3 cycles to get the body around its entire or the blood around its entire body. It's really weird.
Interesting. I got to feed the giraffes at the San Antonio Zoo once.
Oh, you
It
did?
was a wonderful experience. I think I was the oldest person in line, but I also think I had the most fun. I was an adult at the time and still am, obviously. But
Oh dear.
I was
No,
already
I
grown and I
refuse.
was
I
like, I'm
refuse to be
feeding
an
the
adult.
giraffes. I refuse to be. Yes. Thank you, adulthood, for the opportunity. I have decided to go in a different direction.
Yes.
I'd like to be a
Perfect.
child again. Thank you. Um, so this one is a little more recent. This one's one we've been dealing with for a few weeks. A part/patent search of the official gazette of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Um, this one's a little
Mm,
triggering because a lot of us
Oh,
have dealt with it.
yes.
it's recent.
It's very
It's
recent.
very recent, yes, and we have all been challenged. It's interesting that I wonder if the person continues to call and find out if we can answer that, because the answer might not be exactly what they're looking for. They
Mhm.
want a different answer. So by trying different librarians,
Hmm.
and we do get that a lot, we get people who come back with their questions over and over, hoping to get a different answer.
Mhm.
But while that's really easy to look at because we can do a journal search, it's also kind of a challenge, because that's one example of a beginning question that's not the real question.
Right.
Yeah.
I was about to say that the question has morphed over the times that he has asked it.
Right,
Because a
right.
patent search isn't that complicated if you know the inventor
Mm-mm.
or the invention. But in
Right,
this case, he's looking for a particular switch or knob for a particular model of a particular Philco radio.
right.
And it's we're too far away from a searchable component
Mm-hmm.
for a patent.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And the issue is compounded by the fact that he's actually not affiliated with the university and not local.
Yes.
So there's really not much we can do for him except send him to his local library. Um,
Right.
Right,
so
right.
that is something we also deal with quite
But in the
frequently.
process, we found cool things like I found a Philco radio parts catalogs are online all the way from like 1928 to 1940 and downloadable. So I can find the part number of anything that was replaceable at the time.
Right.
But that's not what he was looking for.
Right. Right.
No.
He's looking for a diagram. But yeah, we do deal with
Mm-hmm.
that. We'll have people who call in and say, or chat in or whatever and say, hey, I need this book. Well, come to find out they aren't actually affiliated. And due to, copyright laws and our contracts with vendors, we can't really get it for them. But we try to point them to the correct avenue where
Right.
they can access this book, uh,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's not as immediate as they would like. Um,
Yeah, yeah. And
but yeah,
of course, there's a lot to be said for our partnerships or just knowing where to suggest they go to their public library. Because
hmm
sometimes that's the solution right there.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
definitely. Yeah. And knowing, oh, well, here's the phone number you need to call. Because
Right.
it can be kind of overwhelming when you look at like an org chart or something like that to
Mm-hmm.
know who to call. So since we have an inside track on how libraries work, it's a little easier for us to
To
figure out which
refer
they need to
them.
call.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. This next
Yes.
one is actually a really interesting topic, and I picked it because it was so interesting and so
Oh,
unique. This person wanted oral histories on homelessness, evictions, and renters being thrown out.
an oral history.
Oral histories
Specifically
from,
oral, huh?
yeah, specifically oral histories.
Like audio oral or simply oral transcribed?
That was not in the transcript of the question.
We don't know.
Mm.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
Well, with that, I know there would be several books written on that topic. So the solution might be just to find a book and have a device read it.
hmm
Or maybe there's been an audio recording of such a book.
Yeah, I
Well,
wonder if there have been um we have the Shoah archive and they've got oral histories. I wonder if
Right.
of the Holocaust, I wonder if another um maybe more informal database exists that would
Mm-hmm.
contain those kinds of oral histories for
yes, this would be actually a great source for an internet search.
hmm
So, because a lot of I'm actually looking at one now because I Googled it.
Mm-hmm.
I've got an org that sort of homeless services, and they've got story transcripts of some of the people that they've helped
hmm
on their
Oh,
website. So
yeah.
a lot I would think that an organization like this would be a place to find out about um, the people that they helped, how they became homeless and what they've gone through.
hmm
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, internet searches are sometimes really good because a library can't have every single thing that people would ask questions about. And
Yeah.
that's also where our interlibrary loan services come in, and or just our searches for something on the internet and then we could find it at another location, not
Right.
Not
necessarily
not
a
all
library.
information is going to be formally published.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, like a nonprofit organization or
Right.
a government assistance organization or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So good answers. Yeah, I don't think I can phase y'all. I think it's pretty much, oh, well, you should try this. Oh, you should try this.
Oh,
Um,
definitely. And another source that has oral histories, and sometimes I go to listen to these because I find them so interesting. American Memory is a
mhm.
product of the Library of Congress, and there are lots of oral histories. Sometimes I listen to the oral histories from the Dust Bowl time period,
Mhm.
and there are even recordings of former slaves who have recorded what happened to them, how they felt, or what happened to people in their families.
Wow,
So
that's
here's a
amazing.
weekly podcast that
Hmm.
is recorded by a homeless man in San Francisco.
Oh,
I'll
Cool.
put
wow.
it in the
Oh,
chat.
I see. Is that We the
We the
Unhoused?
Unhoused, yes.
I
So
see the link
there's
in
Interesting.
the
a
chat.
podcast from the uh from the
Huh.
Unhoused. So yeah, this is a great.
Wow.
I would send this person to the internet.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Sometimes the internet is your best bet. But definitely check with the librarian to see if they can make your searching a little easier.
Hmm.
Um, Chris, this one is yours. So I want to see how you dealt with it. Um, an undated, unnamed quote from Vanity Fair. Who said
Okay.
it and when?
Yeah, this was a really interesting one, and I can't remember the details. It was in a book. It was an arts and humanities student, and they were working on kind of chasing down some of their stuff that was in their sources. And there was a book that said, someone said yada 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 in Vanity Fair in the 1930s, and that was what was in the book, and it wasn't cited, it wasn't quoted, but we knew, of course, it was in Vanity Fair magazine, and
Oh,
we had
dear.
approximately a 10-year range to look for it. Um, and I don't recall if we ever got quite to it, but I think we got close. But I went to the Vanity Fair archive and put in a dated search and started doing a lot of quote phrase
Hmm.
searches to see if I could find that article. And I
Mm.
feel like we found something that we thought was, because it wasn't a verbatim quote in the
Gotcha.
book, so it didn't come up that easily. But
Oh, dear.
I God, this is probably 10 years ago that this question happened.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but I remember that it was a lot of like looking for clues and trying them out and seeing
Hmm.
if we could find it that way. Um, but yeah, those are the kind of things that are interesting because
Hmm.
like whoever published this book should have made this author cite that source, but
Yeah.
they
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Copyright.
and then
Of
and then we have
course.
to go back and reinvent them, and we get either unsighted material or badly cited material
Hmm.
Hmm.
um, a lot,
Yeah.
and it's sort of a Holmesian task to figure out which clues are
Yeah.
legit and which are not. So
Hmm.
I don't remember the details of that one. I don't think I could pull it up if I needed to because this was a very
It's
old
been a
question.
it's been a while.
Yeah. We do get a lot of people saying, "Oh, I quoted this book and here's the quote, but I can't remember where I found it and I don't remember what the book was." And so you kind of have to, like you said, it's very Holmesian. It's very a lot of
Hmm.
detective work of trying to figure
Some of
out.
those. We
Yeah.
had one that came in like again working on a dissertation. It was just like a couple of weeks ago. Ryan
Hmm.
took it, and it
Hmm.
was I'm trying to correct my footnotes for my paper, and I know I referred to this book, but I think it was on this page. But can you find me?
Find the book and
Please
find that page for me.
Hmm.
document your research while you're doing it, because finding it after the fact is difficult. Because they had
Yeah.
moved out of the area, and yada yada. It was
Yeah.
Hmm.
those are the fun ones,
Oh, yeah.
and
Definitely.
sometimes you can't get all
It,
the way there.
yeah,
If anyone is listening to this, check out the citation resources video that I did that will tell you how to avoid this problem.
so true. So very true. I love that people, when you say I'm a librarian, they think, oh, you must get to read all day.
Yeah.
And then the reality of the job is, when do I
Yeah.
read? Get
Yes,
to
Other
read for
it's
other
a
fun.
little
duties
bit
Oh,
have
yes,
house
times.
at night in bed.
psychologist and a little bit investigative.
Yeah.
We are super sleuths, we're nerds, we are subject specialists, we wear multiple hats.
Oh yes.
And it's
Oh
so fun. I love what I do,
mm-hmm.
helping people do research or learn how to do research.
So this is an interesting one. I'm kind of looking at like I think
Yeah.
we're skipping ahead around
Uh-huh.
that. Also, we're
All
getting
good.
to the end of our scheduled time anyway.
Yes.
But
Okay.
there's one in here, Katie, distracted driving, but in a video game,
Mm-hmm.
not real life.
Yeah. That was
Whose question was that?
I think it might have been Craig's.
Ah,
Because it was
uh-huh.
pseudo account on our system. Um, but yeah, they wanted to know, um, I think from what I read, I think the question was if you're in a driving game and you get distracted externally, is that going to affect your performance in the game? And they wanted articles or a study on this.
Oh,
And
wow.
um, whoever it was, pseudo account, sent them to a computer science database um,
Okay.
and a psychology database. Um,
Yeah, that was my first thought. Maybe
what I
Psych
would
Info.
do too,
No,
yeah,
actually, well, honestly, my first thought was duh, but
yeah,
my second
Really?
thought would be um like a game design or game
Game design.
metrics.
Yeah.
yeah,
IEEE Explore.
yeah. I would
Well,
think
Computers
with
and Human Behavior is a
yeah,
journal that I know I've come across a lot
Oh,
of times
yeah.
about
Yeah.
how people behave in games,
mhm,
Mm-hmm.
so it might be something like that.
yeah, and with the explosion of competitive gaming, I think we'll see a lot more, or we have seen and will see a lot more research done on psychology within gaming. Because,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people, there are people who practically live inside their games who that's what they live to do.
Yes.
So, how does it
Uh-huh.
affect performance? And it could be argued that, there's the same sports psychology that goes into, being distracted while you're at bat in a
Mm.
baseball game as being distracted when you're trying to, you know, steal a car in Grand Theft Auto 5, or whatever number we're on now.
I
There's a
don't know.
bunch of them. But
I
yeah.
have one of my current students is doing research on game streamers and sort of
Mhm.
the streamer culture.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was like, very interesting. I don't I I'm reserving any kind of judgment because I don't know very much about it except that, you know, sort of an amazing thing that that's even a thing in our
Yeah.
time.
oh yeah.
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 It's a cultural phenomenon for sure.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so those were the really like the best questions that we had. And then there are other ones on my list about, how to find comic strips from the Sunday Funnies from a certain year, or renewable energy companies, or the number of airlines in a certain country, or
Uh-huh.
um, we get a lot of questions on translating articles that have been originally written in another language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so we get a lot of sort of weird or unique questions,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really glad we got to have this conversation because it kind of highlights some of the more fun things we get to research, but also it I hope encourages our watchers or listeners to come to us with whatever questions they have.
Oh,
We
definitely.
love doing this. We all have at least a master's degree in this, and half of us are going for PhDs because we apparently love pain. But
Yeah,
um, yeah,
I haven't even been accepted yet, and I'm already questioning that decision.
yeah.
I'm
Don't worry, it'll
like,
get better. Um,
it's
but
actually, I know this is very strange to think it's a painful, sometimes tedious, and very elongated, stretched out process. But I just love the conversations I have with fellow students and the
oh
people in
yeah,
our cohorts. And in class, I'm like, I'm having this conversation. I'm part of this conversation.
yeah.
And it's feels so worthwhile. And I thought I should have done this sooner.
I had a conversation with one of because Lorene and I are in the same cohort, with one of our colleagues, Lauren, the other
Mhm.
day.